you're just joining us, I'm Amy Dallen. This is Michael Galvis, and we are talking about some of the fantastic player options, no fantasy pun intended, coming our way with Spelljammer Adventures in Space that comes out on August 16th. There are going to be count them, six new player races in this book, about which I am very excited. And we just talked about the gunslinging GIF, who I think are incredibly cool. But our next race really captured my attention once I learned a little more about what they're bringing to the table. Michael, who are the mysterious and fascinating Astral Elves?
So, to understand the Astral Elves, we can look at the other kinds of elves that are out there, right? So, like the elves are known to have sort of traversed all these different realms. And over time, they have become unique kinds of elves based off of like where it was that they ended up, right? So, we have for example, the Eladrin, who travel to the Feywild. And we know that they are a very emotional type of elf whose characteristics are dependent on the type of like season that they're in. So the Astral Elves I see are very different
Just
from
to
the
interject,
Eladrin.
because I want to make problems.
Yeah.
This is not official wording. This is just the way Amy thinks about it. But I love this because it's to me it feels like elves take the shape of their container. You know, like Play-Doh or water. I love that idea. That sort of their mutability, like you pop them in the Feywild for a few thousand years, and you're going to get some fun results. Bake in Astral Sea at a temperature of blah blah blah, and you're going to draw out. Now, apologies to elves. You are very dignified and serious, and I love you very much. But this is how I'm always going to think of it, and I want to infect other people with that. Please continue.
Amy, I could not have described it any better than that. That's incredible. I will never forget that.
I'm
I
here to
am
make
now
problems.
cursed with this knowledge. But the Astral Elves, this is the Astral Elf is what happens when you throw an elf into a rocket and send them into the astral sea and into wild space, right? Because in the astral sea, you don't age, you don't need to eat, you don't need to drink. So, what happens when you are a people who have spent a millennia or even longer in the astral sea, who have lived for thousands and thousands of years, never aging, never needing or getting to enjoy food or drink? What would become of those people? And also, as elves, like, how would you adapt to that environment, or what kind of traits would you develop as a result of your exposure to the astral sea and to wild space? That's what you get here. It's very cool.
I love that very much. And you can already see the way that the flavor crosses over with what we learned about the GIF or GIF, because the GIF originally came here in search of their gods, or to feel closer to them. And so did the Astral Elves on that set, that feeling, that connection. Because the Astral Sea, as again, there's a fantastic video on the main channel about this that'll recap some of this, but it is the realm of thought and it's connected to the outer planes. So there's a level of abstraction and connection to divinity that is inherent in the environment. So that sense of questing this way for a closer connection to something, and that divine element, whatever form it might take, filtering into you as a people, gives us these really interesting and yet widely different results. So if we are, and I also shout out to the fact that I'm going to tip the hat to some of the potential personality traits that come out of this, but I did love learning that they are in fact a little tip of the hat to Mr. Spock. So Michael, what are some ways that your astral elf might have been shaped by these experiences?
So, when I first read about the Astral Elves, the I thought it raised a really interesting question, and that was, if we often think about like how cool it would be to be immortal, right? Like if we were to become a vampire, live for centuries, what would that look like? And for the Astral Elf, it's a reality for them, right? They have lived for far longer than most of, if not all, the other races. Uh, and we And so when you're kind of creating an Astral Elf character, you have to contend with the idea of like, okay, how long have I lived as an Astral Elf, and how might that have shaped me? And I think a lot about American Gods, right? The book and the amazing TV show, because within that series, the premise is people who worship a god are directly responsible for a physical manifestation of their version of a god. And these gods live as long as they are worshipped. So within the TV show, we see Easter, and Easter's whole shindig is that she loves to host parties, these big, glamorous, colorful parties, and that's she has lived for centuries uh, being a reflection of Easter. So I see Astral Elves in the same way, and that is like, what were the moments in their early life that shaped them and created those habits, created those hobbies, created whatever it is that they like to do with eternity. So are they an Astral Elf who has become very stoic, who researches all the time, who believes like, I just need to absorb all the knowledge of the universe because I it is my responsibility to know this and to pass this knowledge on? Or are you kind of like the Astral Elf who believes I have an eternity, I should enjoy it? Or are you maybe an Astral Elf who protects their immortality, right? Because they're not immortal in the sense that they can't die, they're only immortal in the sense that they don't age. So, would you be terrified, having lived in the astral sea, which is this vast, near infinite space where maybe the threats to your life are very rare? Would you be terrified of traveling to somewhere like Faerun, where there are bandits on the road which could threaten your life, where there are all sorts of monsters that want to eat you? You know, like, how would that shape you, being like, I can only die if I make a mistake? Like what a terror.
These are all fantastic branches, and it's funny because we didn't compare notes, but I'm on a very similar page. So when we circle back around to build, we will cross pollinate some of these brainstorm inspirations. As we are putting together our astral elves, Michael, what are some of the things that we know nuts and bolts wise are going to come into play once we have? Obviously, we'll have all the details when Spelljammer gets here, but we do know a few things already, which is that they're going to have a similar overlapping trait to the newer kinds of elves that we saw in Monster of the Multiverse that also is comparable to the Monster of the Multiverse Githyanki. Sort of takes elements of one and elements of the other because they're elves but shaped by the astral plane and creates this interesting thing. Where I asked you and then I got it excited and started going into it. So I'm gonna check my wording before I declare anything. But when they take this borrowing of knowledge that has become part of several of the elf subrace traits, and the way that the Githyanki can tap into the astral sea containing tons of memories and ideas and being the realm of thought, they can in fact delve into memory itself for their astral trance, and they can grab both a skill proficiency and a weapon, which is an interesting combination. Michael, anything jump out to you about
Or
that one?
a weapon or a tool proficiency. So if
Oh,
you're the
yes, thank
type
you.
of character, yeah, so if you don't need a proficiency in a specific weapon, you could just pick up a tool proficiency instead, which is very helpful when you're on a spell jamming ship and you may need to make certain repairs or something of that sort.
So they've got that trans connection to the astral environment. Anything else we should know that you can do, or that we already know that you can do with your astral elf?
You also, as part of being an Astro Elf, get access to certain divine cantrips. So I believe the one we teased was Sacred Flame, which is a really, I believe, iconic cantrip for the cleric. So it's really handy because it deals radiant damage, and I believe it's a dex save. So it kind of adds a little more flex. If you're thinking in terms of build, it adds a little more flexibility for the cantrips that you pick up, and maybe it will even open up a slot for a different cantrip that you would like to pick up through your core class.
Always excellent to come with some stuff already packed in your kit. And we also got a tease of a special version of the Misty Step effect that might be possible for you if you're rolling up an Astral Elf. So you've got that sparkle in your eyes, you've got some mobility, you've got a few divine infused tricks up your sleeve, and you can tap into some extra knowledge. Michael, what would you want to build with an Astral Elf?
So the Astral Elf is it's really flexible, right? They have that racial trait that allows them to teleport a short distance. And that's just really handy for any type of melee type character or any type of class that maybe doesn't have that sort of such easy access to mobility. So I imagine a very cool, calm, collected fighter who in a spell jamming ship to ship battle will just teleport over onto the enemy ship and pull the aggro onto them while your party members on the other ship are maybe preparing the on ship weapons. I also think of the monk. You know, the monk has learned to harness their physical form in a really awesome way, right? Like their body is their weapon. And so, what if you had an astral elf on the astral sea who was a hermit who had nothing better to do than to just kind of like practice their own monk moves and come up with a really unique and kind of weird style? Or maybe you have a monk who chooses the way of the astral self, right? And is sort of learning to transcend their physical form through combat.
I love this. And of course, I like that this brings us right back to what I wanted to get back to, which is the potential personalities that could be suggested by these experiences. Of course, nobody ages in the astral sea. So technically anybody could hang out in there for a really long time, but it is baked into the story of and flavor of this race in a really inspiring way for me personally, because exactly as you said, I was sort of thinking, if I'm brainstorming Astral Elves, I get to draw from any variation on a long-lived character trope. So if you've ever loved rolling up some vampires, you can look like the bored vampire, the cruel vampire, the kind immortal who wants to do good works, the detached immortal who's lost faith that anything matters, the curious immortal who really wants to have every possible experience and answer every question. The hobbyist, which I love, was also in Mike B's wonderful article here, which is sort of maybe you just spent some time learning a skill because you have all the time. What would you do with all the time is a question that can lead you into figuring out what kind of astral elf you want to play and the way that they conduct themselves in the world. So whether they are melancholy or detached or have an unexpectedly quite different personality, you can use that lore to inspire it and back it up with your various traits behind it. I love Cynical 32 suggests Astral Elf Barbarian. That's beautiful because Michael, I think it plays very much to your sense of the Astral Elf who wants to live life to the fullest forever. Um,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
reckless immortal? Come on. That's a beautiful, flavorful combination. Do they change if they leave the astral sea, as you suggested? Do they need to fight against some internal fears, or are they living for these moments where they go, to a specific world that we might know and the rules they grew up under don't apply, and suddenly the danger's so real? Maybe they're like an adrenaline astral elf. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's your character. Uh, Space
Yeah.
basket
Imagine
weaving, also an excellent suggestion. Two brands.
Yeah, what if you were an astral elf who spent a few century in deep meditation, and then one day you were just bopped on the head by a spell jamming ship run by some bombastic gif, and they taught you the way of just like being a pirate, and you're like, I love this. I love taking risks. Like, what would that look like? You'd be so like, I can just blow things up, like if I want to. Okay, I'm gonna set fire to this thing, and I'm gonna kick this meteor.
You heard it here first. Go kick a meteor, although maybe get your gift friends to help because they have advantage on strength checks.
Yeah.
But the I am very excited about the possibilities that this new playable race comes to the table. And look, I'm me, so I also just the fact that they're super cool, they look really neat. They've got stars in their eyes and a bunch of intriguing artistic suggestions of where they might fit into your world. And if you check out the other video, you'll also get some hints that we might meet particular factions of them if you're playing through the adventure that comes with Spelljammer Adventures in Space, which, to remind folks, is going to be 3 books in one, giving you all the different sides of this. Final thoughts on our friends, the Astral Elves.
Bonus points if you make a starry-eyed Astral Elf, right?
Which, not
Like
to get
both in the
right back
literal.
to Neil Gaiman, but very much reminds me of a lot of beautiful comic book presentations, such as Morpheus. Truly, when I said tropes about long-lived characters, I was also thinking of the Endless from Sandman. So thank you, Neil Gaiman. Apparently, in my head, it's all Neil Gaiman and Doctor Who when I try to brainstorm Astral Elves, because both the GIF and the Astral Elves can play into some of these sort of perspectives on time that you get in really good science fiction and fantasy. And I love that. Look, I signed up for Spelljammer because I want to swashbuckle. But the fact that there's also this other side of Astral, this other side of the Astral Sea that, again, I'm going to bring it back to comics, I'm sorry. But the traditional way we think about astral projecting in like Doctor Strange stories of sending your mind out into another realm that's abstract and full of thought, this is a variation on that that overlaps with swashbuckling piracy. And that's unique. And that is so fun. And I can't wait. And now I'm just ranting about how excited I am for Spelljammer. But look, it's almost here. So we're all excited, right?
You know what I was just thinking was how funny it would be. I believe it was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where they go to that planet and they have to fill out so much paperwork because they encounter a people who
Bureaucracy
are
Astral
just
Elves.
yes, like the Astral Elves have grown so bored that they've created so many forms and bureaucratic junk that you just have to get through to get anything done. Like they're just like, oh, oh, you filled out this paperwork. How about we set up a meeting for tomorrow? It'll be about an hour and we can kind of discuss it. And you go to that meeting. They're like, oh, you raised a really interesting question. Let me loop in so and so. We'll set up a meeting for that. It's just because they have an
Because they've got all
eternity.
the time in the world. So
Yeah,
I hear a beautiful tiered social slash skill check scenario. And if you put, let's say, the NPC that your party's trying to rescue at the other end of this thing, and they're on a clock, but the Astral Elves in the middle don't even remember what clocks are, and could not care less. And you got to get through all of these challenges, and then possibly the fight that's going to hit you surprise 2/3 of the way. I'm already in. I'm so
yeah,
in for fight through the I guess this all right, everything everywhere all at once, fight through the IRS
yeah.
to try to get to the thing that you need. It writes
It also
itself. I
It
am
also kind of
delighted.
explains how like you could be a level 5 Astral Elf, like if you were a wizard and you were only a level 5 wizard after 2,000 years, you'd be like, oh well, yeah, that's how long it takes to learn Fireball is just 2,000 years. That's very normal for my folk. And then through the adventure, and you're like, wait a second, casting high level spells is actually really easy as long as I just like beat up people.
Let us know what you can't wait to build with, or what you think you might want to build with the Astral Elves once they are officially in our hands on August 16th with Spelljammer Adventures in Space.